from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The issue I'd like to discuss this morning is the claim by the small banks, credit unions, that the regulation of this fee, lowering it from, according to everything that I've been able to read, 44 cents to about 12 cents, 12 to 15 cents, results in a loss of fee income of about $12 billion. Is that a number that the Fed has recognized? Is that a recognized number? Is that a claim? Or
I have heard that number used.
is it a reasonable argument that this regulation will limit the amount of fee income that the banks and credit unions can charge?
The interchange fee portion of the rule essentially requires the Fed by law to look at the reasonable and proportional costs that the issuing bank faces. One methodology that we followed in order to try to understand the broad nature of what those costs might be was essentially to engage in the set of surveys that I've described. Interestingly enough, what those surveys revealed was a broad range of average variable costs. And as I mentioned before, the average variable cost proxy was used for incremental cost. The language of the statute uses the term incremental cost. That was a little bit hard to translate into something workable, and we thought the notion of average variable cost came closest to it. So in our survey, we looked at a range of issuing banks and tried to understand what their average variable costs were. And we saw, interestingly enough, quite a range, so that there are some issuing banks that can do this at very low cost, and others that do it at very high cost. When the amount that you cite was, of 12 cents and 7 cents, when those amounts were arrived at, they were really derived from standards regarding those average variable costs. So the 7 cents essentially is the median point that we found in our survey. So the median issuing bank that would be covered by this proposed rule has average variable costs of 7 cents a transaction. The 12-cent number was arrived at in terms of looking at the 80th percentile of issuing banks that had responded. So 80% of the banks in the sample survey were essentially at 12 cents or lower in terms of their average variable cost.
My concern is that at a stage in the country's banking system where we are trying to, many banks are trying to rebuild their capital base, they're trying to maintain some degree of profitability, and they're desperately trying to stay open in many cases, especially the small banks and the credit unions, that we at this time decide that we're going to go in and review standards and cap the amount of fees that they can charge on this, lowering their profit, in effect lowering their profit, not allowing them to put profit into their capital base, and something that's very, very counterproductive in this day and age that we're in. And why it has become so critical to do this now? Is there a feeling? I understand that you've been instructed, the Fed's been instructed to do it, but I don't receive any complaints in my district from people that are complaining that their debit card fees are too high, or that in fact they love their debit cards. They love the ability of the banks to offer them a debit card and not have to pass exorbitant fees on. So I think that I would like for you to take more time. I would like for you to consider the impact that this is going to have on small to medium-sized banks and on their ability to add capital to their banks so they can loan more money.
Thank you. Mr. Watt, North Carolina.